I'm a 33-year-old woman, and I grew up in a family where I was always the extra piece nobody needed. My parents, wealthy and obsessed with appearances, had 3 kids. My older siblings, let's call them Ethan and Victoria, were the golden children. Ethan was the athletic one, Victoria was the social butterfly, and I was the quiet kid who got good grades but didn't shine in ways they cared about. It wasn't like they outright hated me. It was worse, they acted like I didn't exist. Ethan was showered with praise every time he brought home a trophy, and Victoria's endless shopping sprees were always necessary because she had to keep up with her social circle. Meanwhile, I was told to be practical and make do with whatever hand-me-downs Victoria decided she didn't want anymore. When I was 14, I started realizing how deep the favoritism ran. Ethan crashed his car, a shiny new sports car my parents had gifted him for his 18th birthday, because he was racing his friends. Instead of getting in trouble, my parents replaced it within a week. When I asked for a new laptop for schoolwork, I was told to save up and buy it myself. They weren't made of money, apparently, despite owning multiple properties and hosting lavish parties every month. I thought maybe if I worked hard enough, they'd finally notice me. In high school, I graduated at the top of my class. My parents didn't come to the ceremony because Ethan had a tennis match that day. When I got into an Ivy League college on a scholarship, they didn't even mention it to anyone. Meanwhile, Victoria dropped out of college after a year, saying it wasn't her thing. My parents were so proud of her for finding herself that they funded her boutique business, which failed within 6 months. By the time I was in college, I'd stopped expecting anything from them. I started my own small business, a side hustle tutoring kids in math, which eventually grew into a full-fledged online learning platform. I didn't need their money, but it still stung that they never once acknowledged my accomplishments. They acted like Ethan and Victoria were the family's only successes, even though neither of them could hold down a job without constant help. The breaking point came when I was 28. I had been invited to a family gathering, one of those over-the-top events my parents threw to show off their perfect family. I overheard them talking about me in the kitchen. My dad joked that my career was cute, but that I'd never amount to anything significant because I wasn't bold like Ethan or Victoria. My mom laughed and added that at least they didn't have to worry about me because I could fend for myself. They genuinely believed their neglect was a compliment. I walked out of that gathering early, but not before I noticed something odd. My grandfather, my dad's father, had pulled me aside earlier that day and asked how I was doing. He was the only person in the family who ever seemed to care. He didn't say much, but the way he looked at me that day stuck with me, almost like he was apologizing for something he couldn't fix. A few months later, I found out my name wasn't even included in my parents' will. Ethan and Victoria were listed as beneficiaries of the family trust, but I wasn't. My mom told me, completely unprompted, that it was because I was independent and didn't need anything. It wasn't just hurtful, it was infuriating. Ethan and Victoria had burned through hundreds of thousands of dollars in failed ventures and luxury purchases, yet they were being rewarded for it. Around the same time, my grandfather fell ill. He was the one managing the family trust, and there were whispers about transferring control to my parents. I couldn't imagine a worse idea. Curious, I started looking into the trust and the family's finances. What I found was a mess. Ethan had been using trust funds to finance a series of failed tech startups, and Victoria had drained tens of thousands on designer goods and business trips that were really just vacations. My parents had covered up most of it, likely to protect the family's reputation. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I reached out to an old college friend who specialized in estate law. We talked through some options, and I started to see a